Go back to the slideshow. Okay. And let's get participants out in case anyone joins. Right here. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, let's get into some learning Torah. It is Monday night, and we are going to be learning, first of all, what's going on in the calendar this week. And then we'll talk about what's going on in the Parshah. And from there, we're looking for one practical, relevant life message. I've said that before, I think. This week, we want to do it special. There is a lot to get sorted. A lot of good things have to happen. Be'ez Hashem, they will happen. And in the meantime, we're looking at Torah. We're looking at Hashem's wisdom to teach us how to navigate our mission in life. And our mission starts right at home, or wherever else we may be right now. So what's happening this week on the calendar, of course, is that although last Shabbos was Shabbos Mevarchim, the blessing of the new month, this Shabbos will actually be Rosh Chodesh. So it's the Shabbos Rosh Chodesh coming up our way. So besides for being a 7-day cycle, and the top of that being Shabbos, which has its own blessing, in addition to that, we have this Shabbos will be the head of, the top of the monthly cycle, which follows not the sun in the 7-day cycling, but it follows the moon. And in this, we have the connection between the top of the weekly and the monthly cycle. Now, generally speaking, the months and the weeks don't necessarily work in tandem. You have the month that changes its new first day from days of the week every month. 29 days, 30 days, 29 days, 30 days. However, each one of these counts bring to us a different type of koyach, a different type of energy and reminder that Hashem runs the world. When we think of the days of the week or Shabbos in specific, it reminds us that as hard as we try, we cannot control that which Hashem controls. Today someone was telling me they wish they could have a button to switch the weather, to make it a little bit more sunny. I think kind of like the idea. However, one of the things Hashem did for us is that we don't have the controls of the weather. Could you imagine? One person would switch on the rain, the other guy would switch on the heat. Back and forth, it would be never a quiet moment in this world. When it comes to controlling Hashem's decisions, the days of the week are defined by Hashem and Hashem only. We can all see the rising of the sun. Those of us, Baruch Hashem, we can see. We see the sun setting, and we still cannot control it. We wish we could, and often we think, if only this, if only that. But clearly Hashem is in control, and that's what the days of the week remind us, one of the things. The days of the month remind us something else. The days of the month remind us that when we look at the moon, and as it becomes a new month, the day before, the moments before the moon is reborn, and the new month will begin, this Shabbos, the moon actually disappears. It becomes as dark as could be. And the darkness of the night reminds us that even if it looks really bleak and really difficult, renewal. Renewal tells us that Hashem has control not only of the cycle of the day-to-day and of the big things in life, but everything is in Hashem's control, including setting us up for more success and setting us up to be able to renew, to rejuvenate, to give us new starts in otherwise bleak or difficult situations. This is what we have. We have this Shabbos coming up, Rosh Chodesh, and in addition to that, it's not any Rosh Chodesh, it's the Chodesh of Tammuz. What's so special about the month of Tammuz? We touched on this last week. Last week we spoke about the month of Tammuz being a month that isn't necessarily Matan Torah. It's not the month where we stood around the foot of Mount Sinai and received Hashem's vision of how the world should and will look in the form of Torah, where everybody and everything will be aligned with Hashem's truest and most core self. That's what the Torah vision is. And that's the month that we're in now. Rosh Chodesh, this Shabbos, will start the month of Tammuz, which is a month in which we are told to go into an otherwise complicated and distracting world and bring the Torah that we've received into regular day-to-day. And that's the new month that we're heading towards, the month of Tammuz. In Hasidic circles, the month of Tammuz is known as Chodesh HaGeula, the month of redemption. Why is it the month of redemption? Because it's in the month of Tammuz that we have Gimel Tammuz, the day that the Frierdiker Rebbe was released from jail and sent to Kastorma, which was the lightening of his first lightening of a sentence. In addition to that, we also have Yud Beis Tammuz, the 12th of Tammuz, which will be the anniversary of when the Frierdiker Rebbe was released even from the exile and was set free to go home. It also, in addition to that, Gimel Tammuz is the day where Yehoshua, in the original battle to conquer the Holy Land of Eretz Yisrael, told the sun, Shemesh Begivin Doim, that the Yiddish people need to have the upper hand, and if they need more time in the day, let the day wait. Let the day wait. And the sun waited for Yeshua and his soldiers, his army, to win that battle. So it's a tremendously uplifting month, but at the same time, it's a month that emphasizes the calling to us human beings, that the key to all this achievement is in our hands, that we put in the effort. So this is what's coming up. It's the month of Tammuz, and it's Rosh Chodesh Tammuz. But I want to point out a day that is before Shabbos. Today is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday night, Thursday. Wednesday night, Thursday will be the 28th day of Sivan. And for many, many years, it was an unknown, a secret Yom Tov. And in Tafshin Mem Gimel, probably the first time it was actually nominated Tafshin Mem Dalet, which was 1984. In Tafshin Mem Dalet, which means that it's going to be 40 years this year, Pei Dalet. And that year, they found out and they figured, they published different letters from the previous Rebbe. And there was a whole movement to be able to bring to the publishing house more and more of the manuscripts that had been found and salvaged, which were sitting in a library and inaccessible to the vast majority of people who didn't get access to the library. But when they started publishing them, so one of the things that they published were obviously the talks and the discourses from the previous Rebbeim. And in particular, they started publishing also some of the letters and correspondence of the previous Rebbe, the Igros Kodesh. And one such letter included a letter to, I forget who, one of the big Rabbanim in American rabbis, in which the previous Rebbe wrote to him that on the 28th day of Sivan, his son-in-law, who was known then as the Ramash, now we know him as the Rebbe, and his wife, Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka, on the 28th day of Sivan, arrived safely in the shores of the United States of America, saved from the Holocaust, on one of the most miraculous journeys that the Rebbe took. And it was in this day where the previous Rebbe had encouraged Rabbanim and everyone to go and greet him because he was an enormous Talmid Chacham. But the 28th day of Sivan was the day in which the Rebbe was saved and came to America, which was the catalyst for tremendous amount of Yiddishkeit and world service, world help that the Rebbe gave from his base, from where he was stationed in the United States of America on the 28th day of Sivan. So that year, Tafshin Mem Dalet, they only found out about it towards the end of 1983. So in 1984, in that year, Tafshin Mem Dalet, as the 28th day of Sivan, which we are going to mark this Wednesday night, Thursday, came, one of the Rebbe's Hasidim, who was very involved in general and a lot of things that are going on in 770, he came up at the Farbrengen before the 20th day of Sivan, on the Shabbos before, and he said to the Rebbe, where the custom was, if someone had a special occasion or a special dinner or something, they would present the Rebbe with a bottle of mashka, of l'chaim, before Shabbos, and on Shabbos they would step forward and they would say they're here to receive a bottle of l'chaim on behalf of a Farbrengen that will take place on such and such a day for such and such an occasion. So with great trepidation, this Mayor Harlech, Reb Meir, came forward and he said that he's making up, there's going to be a Farbrengen. What's the Farbrengen for? It's the 28th of Sivan. It's the day that the Rebbe was saved and came to America. Now, he didn't know whether the Rebbe would be pleased that they're taking this personal, somewhat date and making a whole announcement about it and making it a public thing. But fascinatingly, the Rebbe very much did appreciate the gesture, the ideal, and of course the concept of celebrating and marking a special day. Not only that, the Rebbe corrected him when he said the Rebbe was saved in the 20th day of Sivan. The Rebbe corrected him by saying Ishu Beisei, him and his wife. How could you mention only the Rebbe was saved? The Rebbe and the Rebbetzin Chaim Mishka was saved. And from then on, from that year on forward, 40 years going, every year, 28th of Sivan, it takes us a moment that we should think and realize what a tremendous gift Hashem gave to us. All people who are alive today. Certainly all Yiddish people. And everybody who learns and benefits from the Rebbe's input in this world to celebrate this tremendously groundbreaking day in which a watershed moment because the Rebbe came through the sea, through the Atlantic Ocean. But the idea of where we have a gift called the Rebbe, who was given to us, and the ability to be able to inspire and to teach us all these fantastic ideas. This is this week, Chof Ches Sivan, tremendously uplifting time. So we have this week, we said, Shabbos Rosh Chodesh in one time. It's the month of Tammuz. And also in this Shabbos will also be Chof Ches Sivan. Now, it happens to be that next week we are not going to be having the shir, because next Monday evening will be the big Fabrengen at Beis Menachem with Rabbi Darren for marking Gimel Tammuz 30 years. So we'll mention now also that next week will be also Gimel Tammuz on Monday night, Tuesday, which is the 30th Yom Hilula of the Rebbe from 1994 till where we are now, 2024. We're in Tavshin Pei Dalet, and it's this Monday night, Tuesday, we encourage everybody to, of course, take on extra achlatas, do extra learning, and if you can, come and join in Beis Menachem, if I bring in where Yidden will be getting together and encouraging one another. This is next Monday. Let's jump into what's going on in the Sedra this week, and then we'll go back to this title where it says the universe begins with one person, you. Let's jump into the slide, if we can make it work. The overview of this week's Parshah. This week's Parshah is not very hard to summarize. In other words, there's not many splintered, separated details. Most of the Parshah can be said, it's the Korach story. Who was Korach and what was his story? The Korach was the great scholar, very learned man, who also happened to be prophetic and also extremely wealthy. He was a very wealthy, scholarly man and charismatic at that also. And he himself was one of the older members of the tribe of Levi. Now, just to put things into context, there were 12 tribes, the 12 sons of Yaakov, and they formed the 12 tribes. Shevet Levi, the tribe of Levi, was taken out of the count, leaving behind 11 Shvatim, 11 tribes, but Yosef was split into two, bringing back the number to 12 tribes in the regular count. Levi was still left separated. In which way was Levi separated from the count? And they were separated, as we learned last week. Was it last week? Yeah, last week, or 2 weeks ago. Can't remember now. We learned how Shevet Levi was taken aside, and they were nominated to be the service people on behalf of Hashem, on behalf of the Jewish people for Hashem. Why do we need an entire tribe to be service people? So the truth is, there was within the Shevet Levi, within the tribe of Levi, there was one particular line of a family that were the Kohanim, and that was Moshe's brother. Moshe himself was not included. That was Aaron and his sons, and they became the Kohanim, which otherwise known as the priests. They were the Kohanim, and they were literally the service people. The entire life they spent servicing Hashem on behalf of the people, or servicing the people for Hashem. And they had a support team, which was the rest of Shevet Levi. But Shevet Levi, the entire tribe, did not get a section that would be their tribal portion in the Holy Land of Eretz Yisrael. Additionally, there were many things that they were not included in, as well as joining the army was not one of the things that they had to do, because they were already in the army, the Legion of Hashem. They were considered service people of Hashem. Now, Korach was a senior member of this select tribe, the tribe of Levi. But his cousins were Moshe and Aaron. Aaron had become further selected and become a Kohen. His sons were Kohanim. He had been even more selected as a Kohen Gadol, the high priest. And of course, his other cousin, Moshe, who was Aaron's brother, was the leader of the Jewish people, the king of the Jewish people, the teacher of the Jewish people. So Korach incites a mutiny, challenging Moshe's leadership and the granting of the Kohuna to Aaron. Korach stages a rebellion, and he starts gathering people to join him in negating Moshe Rabbeinu's instruction that he himself, Moshe, was the leader of the Jewish people, and his brother Aaron was the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. Now it's true that Moshe was the one who led us out of Egypt and performed all the miracles that came with that and split the Red Sea. Moshe was also the one who brought the Torah from Har Sinai. Well, and Moshe was also the one who had arranged for man to fall from heaven. So he had quite a strong claim to be the leader. And then Korach still somehow felt it right, reasonable, but also he thought he would be successful at removing Moshe from power and removing Moshe's decision or instruction to make Aaron his brother the Kohen Gadol. Part of Korach's mission included gathering and rallying up 250 Rabbanim, Chashuva people, who came along with Korach and said, yes, Korach is right. Moshe shouldn't be doing this. And they came before Moshe, and Moshe hears them and their complaint. He literally fell on his face. And in his mind, he's saying to himself, we've just had the golden calf. It was all of them within the same short period of time. Not only we had the golden calf, we then had also the complaints against the man. Last week said we additionally also had the complaints the Yiddish people saying we don't want to go into the land of Eretz Yisrael. And now a fourth additional complaint. You don't like the leadership? How are we ever going to find forgiveness from Hashem from yet a further rebellion? And what was more disheartening than this than anything is that as long as you don't start up with Moshe Rabbeinu can daven on your behalf. But Korach, who's complaining against Moshe himself, what's Moshe going to say to Hashem? If the people rebel against Moshe, who's going to talk on their behalf? Who's going to exonerate them from Hashem? Moshe Rabbeinu said to Korach, you want to claim that everybody is holy and you don't need leadership? You want to claim that you could also be a Kohen Gadol? Try it. Try it. Tomorrow morning, show up and try and do what Kohanim can do. Try and bring the offering that only the Kohen Gadol should do. The incense, the ketores, the most supreme service in the Beis Hamikdash. But I'm warning you, it's made only for Kohanim and Kohen Gadol because it's very, very powerful. And although it's highly spiritual, it's super spiritual, and people who are not primed for this sort of exposure, this sort of experience, don't make it. And he warned them. He says, if you think you could do it, come tomorrow morning and try it. That whole night, Korach didn't sleep. He went around rallying, campaigning, canvassing to try and get people on his side. What he didn't realize is that he wasn't fighting Moshe. He was fighting Hashem. Hashem had designated Moshe as the leader, Aaron as the Kohen Gadol, and who's who. And the next morning, as Moshe had told him, all of him and the 250 leaders came, and as they stood there to bring the ketores, the fire that was on their fire pans and the incense burnt the 250 rebellious rabbis alive, and Korach and his family, and Dosan Abiram, the instigators, were swallowed alive into the ground with the earthquake-like opening of the ground that swallowed only them wherever they were and closed itself on top of them. Not a trace left behind. Obviously, the whole entire congregation was in a state of shock. And complaints started coming forth. These were upon him. How could they be killed? How could Moshe Rabbeinu do this to them? As if Moshe was the one who'd done the wrong thing. And a plague broke out. And people in the community started dropping like flies. And Moshe quickly tells Aaron, go and stop the plague using the very ketores, the incense offering. that the people who so wanted to use and had caused so much death, use that very Ketores to demonstrate that when it's done correctly and when they're in the realms of halacha, it brings appeasement and atonement before Hashem. And use the Ketores to atone for the Jewish people's sin, and that's exactly what happened. Aaron stops the plague using the power of Ketores. Following this, Hashem says to Moshe, I would like to demonstrate further, not in a way of destruction. I would like everyone to see clearly that the Kohanim have been nominated by Hashem, and specifically Aaron will be the correct leader in the Kohen Gadol. Let nobody have any doubt. And therefore Hashem told Moshe, collect from each tribe, each tribal leader should bring forth their walking stick, their staff. And Aaron should give his walking stick as the representative of the tribe of Levi. Take all the sticks, place them inside the holiest place that we have, the Holy of Holies. And tomorrow morning, let everyone see which stick has miraculously, as a walking stick, all of a sudden shown a sign of life, of growth. It would be Aaron's stick that not only blossomed as a pure walking stick, disconnected, dried out stick, blossomed and brought forth almond nuts growing off his stick. And Moshe Rabbeinu takes it out the next morning to demonstrate and show to everybody that Aaron, who had his name inscribed in his stick, had a stick that was all of a sudden miraculously blossoming, and the specific choice of almonds, because apparently almonds are one of the fastest growing fruits to ripen. And the message was, don't mess with the Kohanim, because Hashem looks after them what they need at high speed, with immediate concern. And this was the story of Korach and his rebellion, and how Hashem settled it, and the messaging afterwards. The end of the Parshah talks to us about, now that we know that the Kohanim are so special, we the people should celebrate the Kohanim, support the Kohanim. And there was 24 different types of gifts that were designated from the people to give regularly to the Kohanim, which would obviously provide for the Kohanim who didn't have their own land. And more importantly also, and equally maybe, they also had the importance of the people getting used to connecting with their service priests, with the Kohanim who work on their behalf. There shouldn't be a disconnect between the Kohen and the regular rank and file. Instead, we should remind ourselves that they've been nominated by Hashem, and therefore should be treated with that sort of respect on behalf of Hashem. Till this very day, if there's a Kohen in the room and they're calling up people to the Torah, the Kohen goes first. The Kohen should be honored at every reasonable occasion, including if there's people walking into a room, the Kohen should be allowed to go first. If they're dividing things amongst a community, the Kohen should go first, because respecting the Kohen isn't respecting the individual, it's showing respect to Hashem from that way. In this week's Parshah, we learn about the first of the crop of the grain, of the wine, of the oil, as well as the firstborn sheep and cattle and other specified gifts that are given to the Kohanim, and it's all recorded in this week's Sedra, because it's almost like this week's Sedra, major focus on the Kohanim. Okay, this is more or less our summary of Parshas Korach. If you had to sum it up in one word, we say it's the story of Korach. His rebellion and how he was punished, and the Kohanim was saved and upgraded and uplifted and made big. We're looking for a practical, relevant life message from this week's Parshah, Parshas Korach, and the title here we have is, The Universe Begins with One Person, You. So before we get into the Sikha, if anyone has any questions, comments, suggestions, any observations you wanted to make, now's a good time. I'm listening.
Doesn't the universe begin with Hashem? And then Hashem makes us, and that's when it's us. But you say it begins with you, as if it is us, and it isn't, is it? It's Hashem first, then us.
Or the question is great.
Oh.
The quote actually is, the universe begins with one person, and you're saying it doesn't begin with a person, it begins with Hashem. 100%. I think we're going to have to qualify this statement urgently so we don't get caught out. Because right now, as it stands, we are very caught out. I'm going to suggest that the word universe here doesn't mean literally the creation of the universe. I think what we're learning is either the purpose of the universe, the goal, rather than the creator. Maybe also, even more importantly, it ties in together is also when the universe starts existing. What makes it worthwhile existence? Which part of the universe is relevant? And the answer to that is starts with you. Your universe, or the universe that you're in, starts up with you. At least that's how we should look at it. But yeah, the quote is perhaps one of the quotes that are made more to create a conversation than to be extremely 100% accurate in every way you spin it. Well said. Point well taken. Shkoyach. Anyone else? Questions, comments, or suggestions? Now's a good time. We're flicking through the slides, and this is our first quote. What are the merits of particularism and universalism? Oh, these are hard words to pronounce. And is there a way to synthesize them? Now, before I really knew what particularism and universalism was, I actually checked it up in the dictionary. Don't ask me what it said. I knew that the answer to this question, is there a way to synthesize them, is going to be yes. Why? Because, first of all, you wouldn't ask the question unless it was the irrelevant answer. But also, this was so much what the Rebbe did for us over and over again. It took us, the Rebbe would take us to a place where he would highlight how vastly extreme and polarized our two hats that we wear. The two worlds we live in are so far apart, one could argue. And then the Rebbe would take all the time and effort in the world to show to us how, however far apart it looks, it's all by design from one single creator. And our role, our mission in life is to be able to synthesize all these polar opposites. And what we're going to learn today is that although we have very different ways of focusing, is it the importance of the individual, the particulars, that make the whole general, the whole klal, everything important because each particular detail is so relevant? Or the other way around, we have schools of thought who would argue that the individual is only ever relevant because together it makes a powerful whole. In families, you often have this conversation. In countries, you often have this conversation. In companies, in schools. And of course, on a global level, we talk about human beings. Is the individual important and relevant because together we make a very powerful whole? Or is it only specifically because we are, each individual is so precious, so then as a whole we're doing well? Particularism versus universalism. If you had to rate westernized capitalist society, which of these two are more the emphasis? The general universalistic, universal element, or the individual particular is the most important? How does the secular world that we live in view it? Anybody?
Universalism is how the secular world would say, because if you think of things and look at things, it's done for the majority of people, not the minority of people. Particularism is something more specific to each person. And if you speak to people nowadays, they sometimes feel very lost because they don't actually seem to be a part of the what can I say, the things that are being done. They say, you know, where do we fit in with this? We don't fit in. And that's a more universal approach to things. However, some people would say that you can't kind of take so many people's opinion about things to be so particular about the smaller things, because it does need to be done for a majority of people.
Amazing. So we have to make big decisions. The majority vote gets the calling, and the minority always get overlooked. And would you say that that's how? Oh, hold on a second. That was quite clearly at least we're judging what we're talking about with the universal, the secular approach in the world we live in, and it seems quite clear that we lean towards universalism rather than particularism when we talk about making decisions based on the majority. That's one angle. We're looking still if there's any way to spin how we see the secular world we live in today, leaning towards the other side, particularism. So we've got one explanation, or at least one viewpoint, that seems quite clearly leaning that way. Anyone else want to weigh in on this one?
Particularism is for Jewish people.
One more time?
Particularism is for us as Jews.
Okay. We're not there yet. We're still in the other part of the question.
Carry on.
Yeah, we're getting to you soon. We'll call on you in a minute. Anyone else want to weigh in on how the secular world runs?
But if we try to impose the secular world, which is happening anyway, on a global level, right? You're not taking into consideration other people's needs and their cultures and things like that. And people will resist it and it causes conflict and things. But with Judaism, right, it's a group that is spread around the world, but sharing the same values. You know, secular values are different around the globe. And they don't fit in some countries.
I'm going to spin this question. You just triggered me, so I'm going to spin this question. Which one is more likely to lead to conflict? Particularism or universalism?
Universalism.
Universalism
is more likely to lead to conflict.
Yeah.
Because people who have differences are going to get overlooked. And when they start fighting for their corner, let's say, they're going to end up having resistance, which equals conflict. One could argue. Okay? Mrs. Fabre, I see you're unmuted. Did you want to say?
It could be in both, couldn't it? Because particularism could also lead to strife by saying, I want to do it this way, the other one wants to do it that way, and we don't agree.
I'm glad you said that, because I was going to say that on the face value, particularism is not just could do, it's the recipe for absolute conflict. Because if I want to have my way and you want to have your way, if our ways don't match, that is not just going to lead to conflict, that is already conflict, one could argue. Anyone agree or disagree?
Well, then you could talk about Judaism being like that, couldn't you? But I mean, people have been learning and discussing and arguing different things for hundreds, thousands of years. It doesn't stop us being any more Jewish, but it just gives us a different slant on something.
Okay.
But it's a good thing to do.
So if the question on the screen says what are the merits of particularism and universalism, so maybe we don't have to focus on whether there's conflict or not. Let's just focus on the merits. Interesting. I'll tell you what we're going to do. Unless somebody else, there's quite a few of us are unmuted. Please, I'm not sure if we're going to have to call you, but you just speak up. It's all free for all here. No conflict. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add something, and that is that probably Judaism is both, is going for particularism and universalism. So it is of great value. Each life is very important, and each perspective is very important, and it's important to thresh it out. And at the same time, there are universal rules for all Jews that we all keep. So it's both. It has combined particularism and universalism. That's probably the best way to synthesize the two of them.
We're going to have to search for, you know what, that's exactly what we're looking for. Shkoyach, spot on. The question is going to be how. Like, what can we do to make sure that it actually follows through that way and we don't lose track of where we want to go? That's exactly where we want to head. I just want to throw out the question one more way. Unless somebody else wanted to say something, I was going to ask if there is a difference between, let's just say, for recent comparison and contrast, communism versus capitalism. And the communists where everybody's equal versus
No, they
capitalists where everyone make as much money as you can for yourself.
Communism was
Either
never
one,
equal.
how would you spin those two in particularism and universalism?
Communism was never equal, and the capitalists were the ones who were running the communist country. So it was all
Wow.
rubbish.
And it-
Absolute
Okay,
rubbish.
I
because
rest
those
my
poor
case.
people-
I tried.
And when you look into these systems and then you compare to what Hashem is teaching us, right?
Yeah.
These systems are teaching us nothing but falsehood. All it is about is getting us to do their bidding, whether it's
Well,
legal or illegal, whatever. They just want us doing their bidding. And once you've done their bidding, they put their hands up and they say, oh, but we've got it written here and it's a law. They shouldn't have been doing it. So, you know, we're just constantly being led along the wrong path, whether it's socialism, communism or capitalism or whatever.
All the isms.
It's not for the best interest of everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. By the way, Sylvia, I did get your email, but
Yeah.
I did enjoy every minute. I haven't had a chance to respond. Let's just say that tonight we've come together to look at what Torah has to say, and we're looking for Hashem's wisdom. So although we can look around the world and do analysis and then try and figure out which system and which ism has been more successful or less successful, clearly as we can look through history, each way and each path, although they do have merits, have tremendous setbacks and drawbacks. I mean, the famous quote about, what is it, everyone's equal, but some are more equal than others, or whatever it might be. In our story of this week's Parshah, we clearly see that Korach was campaigning for something that gained traction amongst those who were thinkers. And if we get a chance, we'll actually read how the Medrash says Korach was an extremely wise person. He was an extremely wise person. He was deep. And that's how he was able to come up with his argument. He was also able to explain his argument in a way that was so rational that Rabbanim were getting behind him, even against Moshe, because what he was saying was tremendously deep. So let's just say, is on the screen here, Korach challenged the very paradigm of Jewish leadership, arguing that all Jews are holy. Now, that's a big statement to make. Could we really compare to Moshe? Are we as holy as Moshe? But Korach wasn't saying that Moshe might not have additional elements. Korach was very much aware that Moshe Rabbeinu went up the mountain, received the Torah, and we didn't. But what he did say is that although Moshe is more holy, we are also holy. And we doesn't just mean Rabbanim, doesn't just mean people from the tribe, from Levi, but everybody. Everybody has their holiness, and everybody should be allowed to serve and to worship and to connect and to grow on their way. Why do we have to fit into any form of leadership? So he didn't go as far as to say that the leadership is taking us to false places, but he did say that the leadership is corrupt in the sense that they are demanding leadership. Let the people just be. People are good. And this was Korach's argument. And what we're going to learn today is that actually Korach, as deep as he was actually arguing for something which was much more than just jealousy. At the core, maybe that's what it was inside. But he was actually saying, Yiddish people who receive the Torah from Hashem, human beings who are created in the image of God, this sort of ability to be able to be a good person on your own shouldn't need to have leadership to tell us where we have to go. Let's read the first text here. This is a quote from our Parshah, from the story, in which Korach is gathering, and they gathered against Moshe and Aaron, and they said to him, you take too much for yourselves, the entire congregation is holy, and God is in their midst. Why do you raise yourself above God's people? This calling itself Does this sound like promoting discord, promoting individualism, promoting fighting, or the lack of peace? Or is this a calling to allow people to live in peace together? This is Korach's request or argument. And he says, Moshe, why are you making differences? Why are you setting yourself apart from everybody else and having a hierarchy of who's more important and less important? Let everyone be equal.
But
At face
Hashem,
value,
oh, sorry.
sorry. At face value, it looks like he's asking for everybody to be equal and not arguing.
Oh, okay, that's one side. I did notice you said face value, implying that there's a deeper way of looking at it. But hold that thought for a second. I'm holding on to this thought. Go ahead, Mr. Fabry, we're listening.
But Korah's forgetting that it's Hashem who has chosen Moses and Aaron.
Okay, hold it, we're getting there. But right now, we're looking just at this statement. What is Korach arguing for? He seems quite clearly to be saying, give everybody equal rights. Let everybody be on the same and equal footing. Is that true? Could you see that in this claim? And what we want to discuss is, Ms. Fabry, did you want to say something?
Same thing.
Oh, we're on the same page. I think the entire room tonight is in agreement. It seems like, at least I'm going to use the word again, I like the quote, at face value. It seems like Korach just being a nice guy, and he's promoting and he's campaigning for equal rights. And it seems extremely righteous, pious, and idealistic. Now, it does happen to be that Korach was extremely wise, as quoted in I'm not sure if we're going to get to that text right now, but here's some of the other things that happen in the storyline. And what we want to specifically notice is, what was the key to the answer Moshe gave to him, to this campaigning request and his cry and call for unity, for equality. Moshe spoke to Korach and his company, and he says to them, in the morning, God will make known who belongs to him and who is holy. He will draw that person, the one he will choose, near to him. This is what you must do, Korach and company. Take up pans. Tomorrow, place fire into the pans and incense atop the fire before Hashem. And the person that God will choose will be the Holy One. You took too much upon yourself, children of Levi. So one of the interesting, fascinating observations you find in this puzzle is that for some reason Moshe Rabbeinu delays settling this rebellion till the next morning. And Rashi right away says Moshe Rabbeinu was giving Korach a chance to backtrack, but instead of backtracking and rethinking and cooling down, he only wound himself up further and further. But there's another interesting way of explaining the observation of waiting for the morning. And the Medrash explains that Moshe Rabbeinu was basically telling Korach, is it day or night right now? So he looked out, he says, night now, it's night, it's day, it's the end of the day, it's going to be night soon. And Moshe was basically telling him, you don't get to choose whether it's night or day. Like we mentioned earlier, Shabbos reminds us that Hashem is in control of all the things that we see, including whether the sun is rising or setting. And just like morning can't be brought sooner, can't be made to come later, Hashem controls it. So too, Moshe's role and Aaron's role was nominated and selected by Hashem, and Hashem made it this way. Now, when Moshe Rabbeinu tells him that he has been nominated and elevated by Hashem, is that a call for equality? Is that arguing for more peace? Is that more peaceful or less peaceful? It would seem like, at face value, that by Moshe saying, yes, I hear you want us all to be equal, but nevertheless, Hashem has designated that we're not all equal. It seems at face value that effectively what Moshe Rabbeinu is saying is, yes, you are idealistic, but Hashem is not so idealistic. If you can say such a thing. You would run the world your way, it would sound much more peaceful, and Hashem has chosen that it shouldn't be so peaceful. it would seem. But obviously that's face value. Because really what's going on is a much deeper. This is the question we've kind of answered. Why did Moshe respond to Korach's argument? Why is he telling him to wait for the morning? And why did Moshe postpone the rebellion until the morning? The answer is he's teaching the morning part. The quote from the morning is actually the answer. Here's the quote from the Medrash Tanchuma. Let's read it inside. Moshe told them, God demarcated boundaries in his world. Can you substitute day for night? God set the boundaries with, and there was evening, and there was morning. And God distinguished between light and the darkness for the orderly function of the world. As God separated the light from the dark, so did he distinguish the Jews from the other nations. As the verse states, I will distinguish you from the nations to belong to me. Similarly, God distinguished Aaron from all other Jews. As the verse states, he distinguished Aaron to consecrate him holy of holies. As you can't undo the distinction between day and night, so can't you undo this distinction. And this is why Moshe told them, in the morning God will make known. God decides who's who and who is. And all enough in the morning, Moshe demonstrated that God made the world with set distinctions. This was Moshe's response to the nations of the world. The world is a multiplicity. Korach's argument for equal outcomes was misguided. So, I think for the rest of this class, we're not going to do so much text-based. We're going to discuss how we understand what seems to be a major argument for the side of Korach and almost a deficiency in the way Hashem has set up the world. What Moshe Rabbeinu effectively does is he deflects. He says, look, you're not arguing against me. Indeed, if it was down to rational arguments, maybe you'd be right. Everybody should be equal on the same footing and nobody should be more special than anyone else. However, Hashem didn't want to do that. Hashem made night and day, and equally made more important people and less important people. Or better said, people with an important role, a higher role or a lower role. But how do we understand Hashem? So we have no problem with Moshe, because Moshe is just doing what he was told. So let's ask the question on Hashem. Hashem, why did you make the world that it needs to have some people to be higher and some people to be lower? Some people are nominated to do this, while other people shouldn't be doing this. Where does this come from and how is this helpful? What is the Torah approach? And of course the answer is going to be Torah, which is that they're both there. So what it comes down to, what it boils down to, is that Korach's idealistic argument was missing. That in order to have everybody equal, meaning that there is no need to have leadership or people who will dictate, who will dedicate their lives to being holy and thereby become leaders of the people. You need to have a situation of geula, redemption. The only time in history this was true was before the sin of the tree of knowledge, before Adam and Eve. Before they eat from the Chet Tzadas, where there was no evil mixed into the goodness of the creation, you could have people who would just do the right thing. But so long as we have a mixture, you could have good people who will behave badly. Then the creation, the way Hashem has designed it, is going to need to have leadership. Let's say the same thing in different words. In order to create growth, in order to create the ability for people to do something, and that will be called moral, commendable, you need to have the choice whether I'm going to do the right thing or the wrong thing. And when I've chosen to do the right thing, that's a moral decision. But the fact that somebody chose to do something they had no choice over, let's just say I chose to not blow up the world with an atom bomb. It's not like I have an atom bomb to use. So that's not really a moral choice I made. It's not something that I was able to choose. Hashem wanted us to be able to make choices, and therefore created the ability to make the wrong move, and thereby lent importance and relevance to our good choices. And part of that is that now, as fallible human beings, we absolutely need to have leadership. And the leaders also need to have checks and balances. And the Torah guides us through this. But part of the way Hashem designed the world is that there's not daytime all day long. There's night and there's day. There's times where it's clear and obvious what's right and what's wrong. And there's times where it's very blurry. Especially with distractions. And it's during those times that we have leadership that allows us to connect and to stay focused and to not lose track. However, for it seems at face value a very idealistic thing that we should all be equal, if that means ignoring the different roles that people have, not only will it not bring more peace, it's going to be a recipe for the greatest discord. At face value, it will look like it's going to enhance the peacefulness. But very quickly we'll realize that it does the opposite. So both universalism and particularism on their own, both of them won't actually lead to a peaceful and harmonious society. Each one of them needs an element of the other in order to make them successful. And that balance is achieved by celebrating, by treasuring the differences. Differences are sacred. And Korach missed this point. He says everybody should be equal indeed, but only providing that we all stay within our lane as designated by the one who has created us. At face value, it seems much more idealistic if everybody has the same wage and everyone has the same responsibility and everyone has the same role. Does it sound like communism? But that's not actually, first of all, it's not practical, but it's actually not going to work by definition because we're not designed to do that. We have been created for a particular role and mission and given the ability to do exactly that. And the tribe of Levi was given a role to do what it needs to do. And equally, Aaron was given its role, what it needs to do. And that creates the best recipe for peacefulness. By having differences and treasuring it to them sacred, that's how we can each do the best we can do in our role. And together, we create the best universalism grouping with a real peaceful forward. So just by way of example would be the halachas, the rules of what it takes to convert into Judaism. And there was, and still is unfortunately, a major drive amongst people who they themselves probably were Torah observant Jews. And they felt like it was necessary to lower the bar, to make it more reasonable or welcoming for people to become Jewish. And in doing so, they tried to make people feel more welcome and equal. But actually, they changed up what it means to go through the conversion process of becoming a Jew, effectively uprooting the differences in an effort to try and create collaboration and peacefulness and closeness. But what you end up having is the exact opposite. If we cannot respect the differences, then we're not going to respect each other equally. Many times the Rebbe spoke about the importance of women's rights for real, the way it will be in the time of Geula. There's a movement called Women's Rights, which seeks to make women empowered to be able to do what men can do, or men would traditionally would do. And the Rebbe often campaigned the fallacy of such a movement. Instead of a women's rights movement campaigning for what women bring to the table that men cannot do, this women's rights movement is campaigning to try and allow women to have to do what men can do. And the fallacy of it is, where we're on face value, it seems so forward-thinking and universalistic and peaceful. But in actuality, what it's doing is it's making the same mistake Korach made. It's not sustainable, but more importantly, it's tearing apart the community in the name of peace. It's creating discord. In the name of everybody's equal, it's creating a lack of importance to each individual difference. And Korach's mistake was so loud, Moshe Rabbeinu had to make sure that it will be a lesson that will be able to be referred back to for every generation to come. And therefore, it wasn't just making sure Korach was no longer able to be an instigator in his generation. Korach's downfall had to be in a way that would be earth-shattering. It'd be a noise that could be referred back to 3,300 years later, to us here and now, and be able to say, in our life, I might be different than my next door neighbor. And my next door neighbor, or the person who sits next to me in shul, is very different than I. And the lesson we're learning from Moshe Rabbeinu is that just like Hashem created night and day, He equally placed Moshe in his leadership role, and He placed me in my role. And when I do what I need to do to the best that I can, and my neighbor, my cousin, and whoever else, my child, whoever else does what they need to do in the best way that they can do, by celebrating the differences, it'll actually bring us much closer together, and it will bring us to a stage of where we'll be ready for the Geula, redemption, at which stage we will be able to live much more idealistically than we are then, we are today. And the Eibusha should bench us that we should have the strength, the inner strength, to celebrate our uniquenesses, and thereby be stronger to appreciate somebody else's differences, and thereby be able to be closer to Geula. Thank you very much for joining. As we said, next week there'll be the Farbrengen in Beis Menachem 8 o'clock. And Be'ez Hashem, we should have the Farbrengen, the real Farbrengen, in Yerushalayim and HaKodesh, in the Beis HaMikdash in 770. Yishar Koyach, everybody. Zayt Gesund.
Thank you very much. It was really interesting.
Kol
Thank
Tov.
you and good night.